Governor Johnson entered politics for the first time in 1994 and ran as a Republican for the governor of New Mexico, defeated the incumbent Democratic Governor Bruce King by a wide margin, was re-elected for a second term in 1998, defeated the Democratic mayor of Albuquerque, Martin Chavez, and term limited and could not run for a third term, left in office in 2002. Something that's kind of impressive. As governor, he was fiscally responsible and stepped tax and budget increases. He vetoed 750 bills while in office, more than all other U.S. governors combined. So if that isn't impressive enough, I'd just like to present Governor Gary Johnson.
Great. We wanted to take a hard look at the war on drugs. And this was in keeping with a campaign promise to put the issues that should be on the front burner, and this was in keeping with a campaign promise that issues would be first and politics would be last. But I wanted to take a hard look at the war on drugs, and I came at this from the standpoint of I really wanted to crack down on drinking and driving. Look, I don't care if you drink alcohol every night of the week and get sloshed. I don't care if an individual does that, as long as that individual doesn't become impaired and get behind the wheel of a car. As long as that individual doesn't become impaired and do harm to others. So that said, law enforcement, let's crack down on drinking and driving. Well, we don't have the resources. Courts, well, we're just clogged. Prisons, we're full. Well, it turns out that half of what law enforcement does, half of what the courts do, and half of what the prisons do is drug-related. It's about $70 billion a year. Turns out, do you know how many people we're arresting in this country on drug-related crime every year?
It's the million.
1,800,000 people a year. That is the population of New Mexico that we arrest every single year. That's half law enforcement, half the courts, half the prisons. And to what end? So I wanted to look at this. I wanted to look at the war on drugs. So first I thought, well, I'd heard these horror stories about Amsterdam, about Holland, the fact that they just had runaway drug use. And it turns out that Holland, I think, really has the only real rational drug policy in the world. They have effectively decriminalized all drug use. But I looked at Holland right off the bat, and lo and behold, Holland has 60% the drug use as that of the United States. Now that's on a per capita basis. That's kids, that's adults, that's marijuana, that's hard drugs. So if you just look at that statistic, you would potentially drug use might drop in this country. But I looked at this issue. I had no idea the compelling evidence that existed when it came to legalizing drugs. I had no idea. So after extensive study, which actually lasted about 2 weeks, because that's the amount of information there was out there, I came out and I advocated the legalization of marijuana and harm reduction strategies regarding all the other drugs. Now when I talk about legalizing marijuana, same as alcohol. It's never going to be legal to smoke pot, become impaired, get behind the wheel of a car. It's never going to be legal to smoke pot, do harm to anyone else. It's never illegal for kids to smoke pot. But that said, smoking pot, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than yourself, should that be criminal? I don't think so. And when it comes to harm reduction strategies regarding all of these other drugs, harm reduction strategies, the things that we really care about, death, disease, crime, corruption, looking at this issue, I believe that 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related, and that is not to discount the problems with use and abuse. All the problems right now on the border with Mexico, I'm going to say is prohibition related. It's disputes played out with guns rather than in the courts. When I talk about when I talk about harm reduction strategies, reducing death, disease, crime, corruption, do you know that Amsterdam has a heroin maintenance program? In Amsterdam, you can get a prescription for heroin from a doctor. And so the idea was that when it came to death, there would be a reduction in overdose because the product would be clean. It would be the needles would be clean. No more HIV, no more hepatitis C. So death, disease, crime. There'd be no more crime involved in having to pay for the product. And corruption, of course, take the money out of it. The corruption would go out of it. So that was the idea. I met with the chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland, in Albuquerque. He was there for a drug conference. He said, "Look, I'm the chief of police from Zurich. I've been involved in law enforcement my entire life. All of my associates had been involved in law enforcement all of our lives, and we could not have been more opposed to this program in Zurich to legalize heroin, this heroin maintenance." He said death, disease, crime, and corruption was going to skyrocket. But he said, "I'm here today to tell you that Zurich is a much better place to live today. That as a result of this program, death, disease, crime, and corruption has plummeted. It really has. It really has had a positive effect." So, again, advocating the legalization of marijuana, harm reduction strategies regarding all of the other drugs. When I came out on this issue in New Mexico, I wasn't blind to the fact that there would probably be a negative reaction. It wasn't about politics, it was about issues. And so my approval rating overnight dropped from 58% to 28% overnight, just saying I was going to have a dialogue on the issue. When I left office, and I made it a point over almost a 4-year period to go everywhere in New Mexico to talk about this issue, and I did, and everywhere I went seemed to be really well attended, people really engaged in this conversation. And when I left office with a 58% approval rating. So I found the issue to be really thin ice. And by that I mean that with just a little bit of education, people move on the issue.
Make a sensible drug policy attractive to the average voter in this country that is, pro smaller government, free market, states' rights, because it's very attractive to the people in this room, but we're all, of a certain age.
Well, and my experience is that just give people a little bit of knowledge and they move on this issue. This issue, in my experience, is really thin ice. You've heard people have heard the same dogma for 50 years, and just give them a little bit, give them something different. And by the way, this has really gone a long ways. It's been 11 years since I advocated the legalization of marijuana. I think the conversation has advanced dramatically. I'd like to think I have contributed to it and continue to contribute to it, but this is the roles that all of us have. I think Massachusetts, again, how do you bring about rational drug policy? You're doing it right here. You voted for it. You made it happen. So it is happening. It is. And it will. It's really close. I just can't believe that when I look back, I graduated from high school in 1971. I thought this issue was going to be resolved long. 2010? It was 40 years after I graduated from high school, and we're still legal, it's still illegal to smoke pot? Thank you all very much. Really.